The Miami sun blazed down on the gleaming shopping plaza parking lot, where luxury cars sparkled like jewels against the pristine asphalt. Among them, a stunning red Ferrari 488 GTB commanded attention, its aerodynamic curves reflecting the afternoon light. Emma Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her brow as she stepped out of the upscale coffee shop, her work boots clicking against the pavement. At 26, she had oil permanently embedded under her fingernails and grease stains that seemed to follow her everywhere. But her passion for automotive engineering burned brighter than the Florida sun. Emma couldn't help herself. The Ferrari drew her like a magnet, its flawless paintwork and aggressive stance speaking to every fiber of her mechanical soul. She had spent countless hours studying these machines, understanding their intricate systems, dreaming of the day she might own something so magnificent. Her father had taught her to appreciate cars not for their price tags, but for the artistry of their engineering. This particular model represented everything she loved about Italian craftsmanship and cutting-edge technology. Setting her iced coffee on a nearby bench, Emma crouched down to examine the car's front splitter. Her fingers traced the carbon fiber elements, feeling the precision of the manufacturing process. She understood every component, from the twin-turbo V8 engine hiding beneath the hood to the sophisticated suspension system that made this machine dance on the road. Lost in her appreciation of the mechanical marvel, she barely noticed the world around her fading away. The billionaire's fury, "Get your hands off my car right now!" The voice cut through her reverie like a blade, sharp and commanding. Emma looked up to find herself staring into the coldest gray eyes she had ever seen. Sebastian Knight stood before her, his 6-foot frame imposing in a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. His dark hair was styled with precision, and his chiseled jaw was set in a hard line that spoke of a man accustomed to absolute control. At 34, Sebastian had built a technology empire from nothing, turning innovative software solutions into billions of dollars. He was used to people jumping when he spoke, used to immediate compliance with his every demand. The sight of this woman, dressed in faded jeans and a simple tank top, casually touching his prized possessions, sent waves of irritation through his normally composed demeanor. Emma rose slowly, brushing dust from her knees with deliberate calm. Her long brown hair caught the sunlight as she tilted her head, studying this obviously wealthy man with the same analytical attention she had just given his car. She had dealt with entitled rich men before, and their predictable outrage no longer intimidated her. "Sorry, didn't realize you had a look, but don't touch policy," Emma replied, her voice steady and tinged with subtle sarcasm. "Though I have to say, for someone who owns a masterpiece like this, you seem more concerned about fingerprints than actually understanding what makes it special." Sebastian's face flushed red. Nobody spoke to him this way. Board members, employees, even his business rivals treated him with respect born of his wealth and influence. This mechanic, this nobody, had the audacity to challenge him in front of gathering onlookers who were already pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. The challenge? "Do you have any idea how much this car costs?" Sebastian stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "One scratch from your careless hands could cost more than you make in 6 months." Emma laughed, a sound that was both melodious and defiant. The small crowd that had gathered to watch the drama unfold murmured among themselves, clearly enjoying the spectacle of someone standing up to the obviously powerful businessman. "You know what I think?" Emma said, crossing her arms and meeting his glare without flinching. "I think you see dollar signs where you should see engineering brilliance. This Ferrari has a 3.9-liter twin-turbo V8, producing 661 horsepower 7-speed, dual-clutch transmission, and active aerodynamics that adjust based on driving conditions. But you probably just know it's red and expensive." Sebastian's jaw tightened further. He wasn't used to being lectured about anything, especially not by someone who looked like she had just crawled out from under a car. Yet something about her confidence, her obvious knowledge, caught him off guard. "Anyone can memorize specifications," he snapped. "That doesn't give you the right to put your hands on other people's property." Emma shrugged, her casual dismissal of his anger only fueling his frustration further. "Fair enough. But next time you park your precious baby in a public space, maybe consider that people who actually understand machines might appreciate the craftsmanship." unlike owners who treat them like expensive jewelry. The breaking point, she turned to walk away, but Sebastian couldn't let it end like this. His pride demanded the last word, demanded that this woman understand exactly who she was dealing with. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "You think you're clever?" Sebastian said, his voice rising enough for everyone to hear. "Yes. Stay away from my car and stay in your lane. Alone." Emma stopped walking and slowly turned back to face him. Her brown eyes flashed with something dangerous, something that made Sebastian suddenly question whether he had pushed too far. The crowd around them had grown larger, and several people were openly recording the confrontation. "Your lane," Emma repeated quietly, her voice now carrying an edge that made Sebastian's confidence waver. "Let me tell you about lanes, Mr. Money. I've spent 10 years working on machines like this. I understand every bolt, every circuit, every line of code in their computer systems. I can diagnose problems that would leave your dealership mechanics scratching their heads. But you're right about one thing." She stepped closer, close enough that Sebastian could smell the faint scent of motor oil and vanilla that somehow suited her perfectly. "I should stay in my lane. The lane where people actually know what they're talking about." The mechanical revelation, as if summoned by their confrontation, the Ferrari suddenly emitted a series of electronic beeps. Sebastian spun around to see warning lights flashing across the dashboard, their red glow visible even through the tinted windshield. The crowd murmured with interest as the expensive machine that had started this argument now seemed to be experiencing problems of its own. Sebastian rushed to the driver's door, his earlier fury replaced by panic. He tried to start the engine, but it responded with nothing more than clicking sounds and increasingly urgent warning chimes. The dashboard looked like a Christmas tree, with every conceivable error light illuminated. No, Sebastian muttered, trying the ignition again. The car that had been running perfectly when he parked it 20 minutes ago now appeared completely dead. He pulled out his phone, already dialing his premium roadside assistance service, but Emma's voice stopped him. "Electronic control unit?" "Failure," she said matter-of-factly, as if diagnosing the problem from 20 feet away. "Probably a cascade failure in the hybrid system integration. The warning pattern you're seeing is classic ECU communication breakdown." Sebastian looked up from his phone, desperation beginning to replace his earlier arrogance. "What are you talking about?" Emma walked closer to the car, but this time she kept her hands carefully behind her back. "Your car's brain just crashed. All those computers that make this thing run are talking to each other in digital gibberish right now. It's not a mechanical problem, it's software." The irony wasn't lost on Sebastian. He had built his fortune on software, on understanding how digital systems worked, but in this moment, he felt completely helpless.
Ow.
Meanwhile, this woman he had, Justin Solden, seemed to understand his car better than he did. "The unexpected solution, can you fix it?" Sebastian asked, his voice quieter now. Stripped of its earlier aggression, Emma studied him for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. The crowd watched with interest, sensing that the dynamic between these two had shifted dramatically. She could walk away, leave him stranded with his expensive paperweight, and it would serve him right for his arrogance. "Maybe," she said finally, "but I'll need to access the diagnostic port, which means getting close to your precious car again. Think you can handle that without having another meltdown?" Sebastian's face reddened, but this time it was embarrassment rather than anger. He nodded stiffly, stepping aside to give her room to work. Emma pulled a small device from her purse, a professional-grade OBD scanner that looked distinctly out of place with her casual appearance. "You just carry diagnostic equipment in your purse?" Sebastian asked, genuine curiosity replacing his hostility. "I'm a mechanical engineer," Emma replied, connecting the scanner to the car's diagnostic port. "This is like asking a doctor if they carry a stethoscope. I also have a tire pressure gauge, a multimeter, and emergency jumper cables. Never know when you might need to help someone out." The subtle dig wasn't lost on Sebastian. While he had been busy insulting her, she had been prepared to help solve problems. The scanner beeped and began displaying screens of data that meant nothing to him but clearly told Emma everything she needed to know. "There we go," Emma murmured, scrolling through error codes. "Looks like a sensor communication failure triggered a safety shutdown. The ECU is trying to protect the engine by cutting power, but it's stuck in a loop. I can reset the system, but You'll need to get this properly diagnosed within the next few days before it happens again. She worked quickly, her fingers dancing over the scanner's interface with the confidence of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Within minutes, the warning lights began disappearing from the dashboard. The crowd watched in amazement as the car that had seemed completely dead suddenly hummed back to life. Sebastian turned the key, and the Ferrari's engine purred with its characteristic smooth power. He stared at Emma with a mixture of gratitude and confusion, Curly struggling to reconcile his earlier assumptions about her with the professional competence she had just displayed. "How much do I owe you?" he asked, reaching for his wallet. Emma packed up her scanner and closed the hood with a gentle click. "Nothing. Consider it a lesson in not judging people by their appearance. And maybe next time someone appreciates your car's engineering, try saying thank you instead of screaming at them." She picked up her forgotten coffee and started walking toward the parking garage, leaving Sebastian standing beside his rescued Ferrari. The crowd began to disperse, but not before several people approached Emma to ask for her business card. Sebastian watched it all, feeling smaller than he had in years. "Wait," he called after her, but Emma didn't turn around. She disappeared into the shadows of the parking garage, leaving him with nothing but the memory of her confident smile and the humbling knowledge that he had just been schooled by someone he had tried to dismiss. The lingering impact. Sebastian sat in his perfectly functioning Ferrari, but found himself reluctant to drive away.
Oh.
The encounter had shaken something loose inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. When was the last time someone had challenged him without wanting something in return? When was the last time he had met someone who seemed completely unimpressed by his wealth and status? He found himself replaying the conversation, hearing Emma's words about understanding the craftsmanship, rather than just the price tag. She had been right, of course. He'd loved the Ferrari because it was exclusive, because it announced his success to the world. But Emma had seen something deeper, something he had missed entirely. The irony stung. He had built his fortune by understanding complex systems, by seeing solutions where others saw problems. Yet this woman, working in what he had assumed was a simple, blue-collar job, had demonstrated a technical sophistication that rivaled his own expertise in software. More than that, she had treated him like just another person who needed help. Not like a billionaire who could make or break careers with a phone call. There had been no deference, no attempt to curry favor or gain advantage, just straightforward competence and a willingness to help, even after he had insulted her. Sebastian started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, but Emma's words followed him. He had spent so many years surrounded by people who told him what he wanted to hear that he had forgotten what genuine honesty sounded like. And despite his wounded pride, he found himself hoping their paths would cross again. In the parking garage, Emma climbed into her well-worn pickup truck, shaking her head at the encounter. She had dealt with entitled rich men before, but something about Sebastian Knight had been different. Beneath all that arrogance, she had glimpsed something else. Something that made her think there might be more to him than his expensive suit and cold gray eyes. But she wasn't holding her breath. In her experience, people like Sebastian Knight lived in a different world. One where money solved every problem and status mattered more than character. Still, as she drove back to her garage, in the industrial part of town, she couldn't quite shake the memory of the gratitude in his eyes when she had fixed his car. Neither of them realized it yet, but their collision in that sun-baked parking lot had set something in motion. Something that would change both their lives in ways they never could have imagined. 3 days had passed since the parking lot encounter, but Sebastian Knight couldn't get Emma Rodriguez out of his mind. He sat in his glass-walled office, overlooking downtown Miami, staring at his phone instead of the quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk. The Ferrari had run perfectly since Emma's repair, but her words echoed in his thoughts like a song he couldn't shake. Sebastian had built his empire, Knight Technologies, by reading people and situations with laser precision. Yet Emma had completely blindsided him. She possessed a technical brilliance that matched his own, wrapped in a confidence that didn't need expensive clothes or corporate titles to announce itself. For the first time in years, someone had treated him like an ordinary person rather than a walking bank account. The decision came suddenly. Sebastian grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. leaving his assistant scrambling to reschedule his afternoon meetings. He needed to see Emma again, but this time he would approach her as the man he wanted to be, not the arrogant billionaire he had become. Rodriguez Auto Works occupied a converted warehouse in Miami's industrial district. Far from the gleaming towers of downtown, Sebastian pulled his Ferrari into the parking lot, noting how the building's clean lines and modern equipment visible through the open bay doors suggested serious professionalism, despite the humble location. Inside, the garage hummed with activity. State-of-the-art diagnostic equipment lined the walls, and several high-end vehicles were in various stages of repair. Emma stood beside a lifted Lamborghini, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing coveralls that somehow made her look more attractive than any evening gown could manage. She looked up as Sebastian approached, her expression shifting from surprise to wary amusement. "Oh well, Mr. Money is back. Did your precious Ferrari break down again? Or are you here to yell at someone else for appreciating fine machinery?" Sebastian took a deep breath, knowing he deserved her sarcasm. "Actually, I came to apologize. Properly this time, and to ask if you might be willing to work on some other cars I own." The garage Turema set down her wrench and studied him carefully. Sebastian looked different somehow, less rigid than he had in the parking lot. His expensive suit had been replaced with dark jeans and a button-down shirt, and his gray eyes held something that might have been genuine contrition. "Other cars?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Just how many vehicles does one person need?" "More than I probably should own," Sebastian admitted. "I collect them, but I'm starting to think I don't really understand them the way you do." The Ferrari incident made that pretty clear. Carlos, Emma's business partner and longtime friend, looked up from the engine he was working on, a stocky man in his 40s with grease-stained hands and a knowing smile. He had watched Emma handle difficult customers before, but something about this particular rich guy seemed different. "Emma knows more about cars than most factory engineers," Carlos called out. "She's got a gift for making machines sing, but she doesn't work cheap, and she doesn't work for jerks." Sebastian nodded toward Carlos before focusing back on Emma. "I understand. And I was definitely a jerk the other day. I'm hoping to prove I can be better." Emma wiped her hands on a shop rag, considering his words. She had spent her entire career proving herself to men who assumed she didn't belong in their world. Most of the time, they either dismissed her completely or tried to patronize her with false praise. Sebastian's direct acknowledgement of his behavior felt different, more honest. "What kind of cars are we talking about?" she asked, her professional curiosity beginning to overcome her personal irritation. Sebastian's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. A 1967 Shelby GT 500, a McLaren 720S, an Aston Martin DB11, and a few others. "They're all properly maintained, but I've been taking them to the dealership for service. After seeing how you diagnosed the Ferrari's problem in minutes, I realized I might be missing out on better care." Emma felt her pulse quicken. Those weren't just expensive cars. They were automotive legends, representing different eras and philosophies of performance engineering. The Shelby alone was worth more than most people's houses. And working on a McLaren would be a dream come true for any serious mechanic. The unexpected connection. "I suppose I could take a look," Emma said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice, "but I have conditions. You don't hover while I work, you don't question my methods, and you pay my standard rates regardless of how much money you have." Sebastian smiled, the first genuine smile Emma had seen from him. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and infinitely more approachable. "Deal, but I have one condition of my own." "What's that?" "Let me buy you dinner afterward, somewhere we can talk without the sound of air tools and engine noise." Emma hesitated. She had learned to be cautious about mixing business with personal relationships, especially with wealthy clients who might have ulterior motives. But something in Sebastian's expression suggested this wasn't about conquest or showing off his wealth. "Fine," she said finally, "but somewhere normal. I'm not dressing up for some pretentious restaurant where they serve tiny portions on giant plates." Sebastian laughed, a rich sound that echoed through the garage. "I know just the place." 2 hours later, Emma found herself sitting across from Sebastian at a small Cuban restaurant in Little Havana. The kind of place where the food was incredible and the atmosphere was warm and unpretentious. She had changed from her coveralls into jeans and a simple blouse, but she still felt overdressed compared to the casual local crowd. "This is more like it," she said, tasting the perfectly seasoned ropa vieja. "How did you find this place? It's not exactly on the tourist maps." Sebastian took a sip of his Cuban coffee before answering. "My first office was about 6 blocks from here. When I was starting Night Technologies, I was living on instant ramen and determination. This place kept me fed during some very lean months. Maria, the owner, used to let me pay when I could afford it." Emma looked at him with new interest. She had assumed Sebastian came from money, that his success was built on privilege and connections rather than genuine struggle. "You started from nothing, less than nothing," Sebastian confirmed. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 19. I had some life insurance money, but not much. I dropped out of college and spent everything I had developing my first software program. For about 2 years, I wasn't sure if I was going to revolutionize data management or end up homeless. Shared stories, the revelation shifted something between them. Emma had grown up working class, the daughter of a mechanic who taught her that honest work was more valuable than easy money. She had assumed Sebastian wouldn't understand her world, but his story suggested they might have more in common than she had imagined. "I'm sorry about your parents," she said softly. "That must have been incredibly difficult." Sebastian nodded, his eyes distant for a moment. "The hardest part was losing my dad's garage. He wasn't a professional mechanic, but he loved working. On cars in his spare time, he taught me to change oil and replace spark plugs, basic stuff. After they died, I had to sell the house and all his tools. I told myself I'd buy them back someday, but by the time I could afford it, I was so focused on software that I'd forgotten about engines entirely." Emma felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the spicy food. "That part of why you collect cars now?" "Maybe," Sebastian admitted. "I never really thought about it that way, but you might be right. I buy them, but I don't really connect with them the way my father connected with his old Mustang. They're more like trophies than tools." "Cars aren't meant to be trophies," Emma said, leaning forward slightly. "They're meant to be experienced. Understood, loved. Each one has its own personality, its own quirks and preferences. The McLaren you mentioned, it's going to handle completely differently from the Aston Martin. It's not just because of the specs, but because of the philosophy behind. The engineering." Sebastian found himself captivated by her passion. When Emma talked about cars, her entire demeanor changed. Her eyes lit up, her gestures became more animated, and her voice carried a musicality that was absolutely magnetic. He realized he could listen to her talk about mechanical engineering for hours. "Tell me about your dream," he said impulsively. "What do you really want to do with your life?" Emma blushed slightly, unused to such direct interest in her personal ambitions. "I want to open a technical school for underprivileged kids, especially girls. There are so many barriers to entry in automotive engineering, so much gatekeeping. I want to create a place where talent matters more than background, where someone like me could get started without having to fight for every opportunity." Sebastian leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter about the obstacles she'd faced. Yet she wanted to tear down those obstacles for others. Her generosity of spirit was as impressive as her technical skills. The business interruption there. Conversation was interrupted by Sebastian's phone buzzing insistently. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I'm sorry, I need to take this."
What?
"My business partner." Emma watched as Sebastian's entire demeanor changed during the phone call. His relaxed posture stiffened. His voice became clipped and professional, and the warmth disappeared from his eyes. She caught fragments of conversation about quarterly projections, market positioning, and investor concerns. "I have to go, Sebastian," said after ending the call, genuine regret in his voice. "There's a crisis at the office that apparently can't wait until tomorrow." Emma nodded, understanding that business emergencies were part of his world, even if they frustrated her. "Of course, send me the details about your cars, and I'll work up some service schedules." Sebastian stood to leave, then paused. "Emma, I had a really good time tonight. Would you be willing to do this again sometime?" She smiled, the first completely. unguarded smile she had given him. "I'd like that. But next time, turn off your phone." Sebastian laughed. "Deal." The revelation after Sebastian left, Emma sat in the restaurant for a few more minutes, processing the evening's revelations. The man who had screamed at her for touching his Ferrari had revealed himself to be complex, driven, and surprisingly vulnerable. His success hadn't made him immune to loss or loneliness, and his interest in her seemed genuine rather than predatory. Yet she also recognized the danger in getting involved with someone from his world. Sebastian might be more down-to-earth than she had initially assumed, but he still lived in a realm of corporate politics and billion-dollar decisions that she didn't fully understand. One phone call had been enough to pull him away from their dinner, reminding her that his obligations extended far beyond personal relationships. Emma paid her portion of the check and walked to her truck, her mind spinning with possibilities and concerns. She was attracted to Sebastian, that much was undeniable. But attraction wasn't enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. She would work on his cars, get to know him better, but she would guard her heart until she was sure he was worth the risk. Meanwhile, Sebastian sat in his downtown office, dealing with a minor software glitch that his team had elevated to crisis status. As he fielded calls from panicked clients and reassured nervous investors, his thoughts kept drifting back to Emma's laugh, to the passion in her voice when she talked about her dreams, to the way she had looked at him when he shared his story about his parents. For years, Sebastian had dated women who moved in his social circles, who understood the demands of his lifestyle but also seemed more interested in his bank account than his personality. Emma was different. She challenged him, inspired him, and made him want to be better than he was. But as he looked out at the Miami skyline, Sebastian also recognized the challenges they would face. His world moved at a different pace, operated by different rules. Emma valued authenticity and simplicity, qualities that were often in short supply in his corporate environment. Making a relationship work would require more than good intentions. Still, as he finally left the office near midnight, Sebastian found himself looking forward to tomorrow in a way he hadn't felt in years. Emma Rodriguez had awakened something in him that he thought was lost forever, and he was determined not to let it slip away. The foundation had been laid for something deeper than either of them expected. The real test of their connection was yet to come. 2 weeks had passed since their dinner at the Cuban restaurant. Emma found herself looking forward to Sebastian's visits to the garage more than she cared to admit. True to his word, he had brought his entire collection for her expert care, and each vehicle revealed new layers to his personality. The pristine Shelby GT500 spoke to his appreciation for American muscle, while the sophisticated McLaren showed his love of cutting-edge technology. Emma was under the hood of his Aston Martin DB11, fine-tuning the engine timing when Sebastian arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee from their favorite Cuban place. She had grown accustomed to these small gestures. The way he remembered how she liked her coffee, the way he listened intently when she explained what she was doing to his cars. "How's the patient today?" Sebastian asked, setting her coffee on the workbench where she could reach it easily. Emma smiled without looking up from the engine bay. "She's got a beautiful soul, but she's been neglected. Someone's been taking her to quick lube places instead of giving her the attention she deserves. The timing was off, oil filter was cheap, and don't get me started on the spark plugs they used." Sebastian winced. "I plead guilty to automotive neglect. But in my defense, I didn't know better until I met you." Their relationship had evolved into something comfortable yet electrically charged. Sebastian had proven himself to be genuinely interested in learning about his cars rather than just showing them off. He asked thoughtful questions, remembered her explanations, and never once questioned her expertise or methods. More importantly, he had kept his promise to turn off his phone during their personal time together. "There," Emma said, straightening up and wiping her hands on a shop rag. "Try her now." Sebastian slid behind the wheel and turned the key. The Aston Martin's V12 engine came to life with a deep, throaty purr that was music to both their ears. Emma grinned with satisfaction as the engine settled into a perfect idle, all 12 cylinders firing in harmony. "She sounds incredible," Sebastian said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "It's like you gave her a new voice." "I just reminded her how to sing," Emma replied. These machines want to perform, Sebastian. They just need someone who understands their language. The invitation, Sebastian turned off the engine and stepped out of the car. But something in his expression had changed. He looked nervous in a way Emma hadn't seen since their first dinner together. Emma, I need to ask you something. And I want you to know you can absolutely say no without it affecting our business relationship. Emma felt her pulse quicken. What is it? Night Technologies is hosting our annual investor gala next Friday. It's a big deal, black tie. All the major players in tech and finance will be there. I know it's not your scene, but I was hoping you might consider coming with me as my date, not just as a friend. Emma's first instinct was to refuse. She had attended exactly 0 black tie events in her life, and the thought of navigating a room full of billionaires and power brokers made her stomach clench with anxiety. But the vulnerability in Sebastian's eyes stopped her reflexive rejection. I don't exactly have a ball gown in my closet, she said carefully. I know a personal shopper who could help with that if you're willing. But Emma, I need you to know something first. These people, they can be judgmental. They're going to look at you and make assumptions about why you're with me. Some of them won't be kind about it. Emma appreciated his honesty, even as it stung. You're saying they'll think I'm some kind of gold digger. Some of them, yes. I don't care what they think. I care about you. And I want you there with me because you make me better. You remind me who I want to be. The sincerity in his voice melted her last resistance. Despite her fears about his world, Emma had come to care deeply for Sebastian. She saw the man he was beneath the billionaire exterior, the person who remembered his father's garage and wanted to make a difference beyond just making money. Okay, she said quietly. I'll go. But if anyone treats me like garbage, I'm leaving. Sebastian's face lit up with relief and joy. Deal. And Emma, anyone who treats you with anything less than complete respect will answer to me. The preparation the next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation that felt surreal to Emma. Sebastian's personal shopper, sophisticated, a woman named Isabella, had worked miracles in finding a dress that was elegant without being ostentatious. The deep emerald green gown complemented Emma's coloring perfectly. Its classic lines made her feel confident rather than like she was wearing a costume. Carlos had closed the shop early on Friday so he could help Emma get ready. A protective older brother, despite his claims that he didn't understand all the fuss. You look like $1 million, Mia, he said as Emma examined herself in the shop's bathroom mirror. But remember, you're worth more than all their money combined. Sebastian arrived to pick her up in his Aston Martin, looking devastatingly handsome in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. When he saw Emma, his face went completely still for a moment before breaking into a smile that made her heart flutter. You're absolutely stunning, he said softly, offering her his arm. Thank you for doing this with me. The gala was held at Miami's most exclusive hotel, and Emma felt increasingly out of place as they walked through the marble-floored lobby toward the ballroom. Sebastian seemed to sense her nervousness and squeezed her hand gently. Just be yourself, he murmured as they approached the entrance. You belong here as much as anyone else. The ballroom was magnificent, filled with Miami's elite, dressed in designer gowns and expensive suits. Emma recognized several faces from business magazines and gossip columns, people whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small countries. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that money didn't make them better than her. It's just different. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. Sebastian introduced her to various colleagues and acquaintances, describing her as a brilliant automotive engineer without going into specifics about how they met. Most people were politely interested, and a few even engaged her in genuine conversation about her work. Then Richard Hawthorne arrived. Sebastian's business partner and primary investor was a man in his late 50s with silver hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. He approached them during cocktail hour, his gaze sweeping over Emma with obvious disapproval. Sebastian Hawthorne said smoothly, Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?
Richard.
This is Emma Rodriguez. Emma, my business partner, Richard Hawthorne. Hawthorne extended his hand, but his smile never reached his eyes. Ms. Rodriguez, and what do you do? I'm an automotive engineer, Emma replied, maintaining her composure, despite the obvious condescension in his tone. How interesting. Where? Did you study? Emma felt the trap in his question. Her community college degree and technical certifications were impressive achievements given her background, but they wouldn't sound impressive to this crowd. I studied locally and learned most of what I know through hands-on experience. Hawthorne's smile became even more artificial. Of course, Sebastian has always been drawn to unique individuals. The insult was subtle, but unmistakable. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Sebastian stepped closer. To her side, "Emma is the most talented engineer I've ever met," he said firmly. "She solved problems that stumped teams of MIT graduates." "I'm sure she has many talents," Hawthorne replied, his tone making the words sound dirty. "Sebastian, might I have a word with you privately?" The breaking point, Sebastian hesitated, clearly torn between politeness and protection. "Can it wait, Richard? We're enjoying the party. I'm afraid it's urgent. About the Morrison deal." Touch Sebastian's arm lightly. "It's fine. I'll get some air on the terrace." She walked away before Sebastian could protest, needing space to process what had just happened. The terrace was quieter, with only a few couples enjoying the Miami night air. Emma stood at the railing, looking out over the city lights and trying to calm her racing heart. She had known this might happen, had prepared herself for it intellectually, but the reality of being dismissed and insulted still stung. Worse was the knowledge that Sebastian would face pressure to choose between her and his business relationships. Behind her, she heard footsteps and turned to see Sebastian approaching, his face tight with anger. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. Richard was completely out of line. "What did he say to you?" Emma asked, though she suspected she already knew. Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "He thinks you're a distraction. He's concerned about my image, about how certain investors might react to me, dating someone from a different social class. He wants me to end things between us." Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him to mind his own business." "But Emma, I need you to know that this is going to be an ongoing issue. My world isn't always kind to outsiders." Emma nodded slowly, her mind racing. She could handle Richard Hawthorne's snobbishness, but she couldn't handle being a constant source of conflict in Sebastian's professional life. The success he had worked so hard to build shouldn't be threatened by their relationship. "Maybe he's right," she said quietly. "Maybe I am a distraction you can't afford." Sebastian's face went pale. "Don't say that. Don't let him win." "This isn't about winning or losing, Sebastian. It's about reality. Your world and mine don't mix easily." Before Sebastian could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of breaking glass from inside the ballroom, followed by shouts and commotion. The crisis, they rushed back inside to find chaos erupting around the main presentation stage. Knight Technologies' latest software demonstration had crashed spectacularly, displaying error messages and corrupted data. Instead of the smooth presentation that was supposed to close a major deal with investors, Sebastian immediately moved toward the stage, his CEO instincts taking over, but Emma caught his arm. "Wait," she said, her engineer's mind analyzing the problem. "Look at the error pattern. This isn't a software crash, it's a hardware failure.
Ow.
Probably the server array overheating under the presentation load." Sebastian stared at her, then at the cascading errors on the multiple screens around the ballroom. "Are you sure?" "Trust me," Emma said firmly. "I know systems failure when I see it. Software is fine, but your hardware can't handle the processing demand." "Where's your server room?" Within minutes, Emma found herself in the hotel's basement. Server room, her elegant dress hiked up as she crawled between racks of expensive computer equipment. The room was stifling hot, and several servers were displaying temperature warnings that confirmed her diagnosis. The cooling system failed. She called out to Sebastian, who was watching in amazement as she traced cables and checked connections. Probably been running marginal for days, but the heavy presentation load pushed it over the edge. Emma located the manual override for the backup cooling system and managed to reset the primary units. Within minutes, the server temperatures began dropping, and the error messages on the screens upstairs started clearing. "How did you know how to do that?" Sebastian asked, as they rode the elevator back to the ballroom. Emma smiled, some of her confidence returning. "Heat management is heat management, whether it's a car engine or a computer server. The principles are the same." By the time they returned to the ballroom, the presentation was back online, and the investors were applauding the quick recovery. Richard Hawthorne approached them, his expression carefully neutral. "Sebastian, I'm told you resolved the technical crisis very quickly. How did you manage that?" Sebastian looked at Emma, then back at his business partner. "I had help from the most brilliant engineer I know. Emma diagnosed the problem in seconds and fixed it in minutes. She probably saved us millions in lost deals." Hawthorne's gaze shifted to Emma, reassessing her with obvious reluctance. "Well, that was fortunate." "It wasn't fortune," Sebastian said firmly. "It was expertise." "Emma, would you mind explaining to Richard what actually happened?" Emma straightened her shoulders and launched into a technical explanation of the server failure and repair. She used precise terminology and clear logic, demonstrating an understanding of complex systems that impressed even the skeptical investors who had gathered to listen. When she finished, the small crowd of listeners applauded politely, and several business cards were pressed into her hand. Richard Hawthorne's expression had shifted from condescension to grudging respect. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said formally, "I may have misjudged you earlier. Sebastian is fortunate to have someone with your skills in his corner." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And Emma accepted it with grace, the declaration later. As the gala wound down and they stood together on the hotel's rooftop garden, Sebastian took Emma's hands in his. "I need to tell you something," he said, his gray eyes serious. "Tonight, watching you save my company, seeing you handle Richard and the investors, I realized something I should have known weeks ago." Emma's heart began racing. "What?" "I'm in love with you. Not because you're different from the women in my world. Not because you challenge me or keep me grounded, though you do all of those things. I love you because you're extraordinary, Emma. You're brilliant and kind and brave, and you make me want to be the best version of myself." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Sebastian, I know my world isn't easy," he continued. "I know there will be more Richard Hawthornes, more people who don't understand what I see in you. But I don't care what they think. I care what you think. I care what we build together." Emma looked into his eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there. Despite all the obstacles, despite the differences in their backgrounds, she had fallen just as hard for him. "I love you too," she whispered. "But Sebastian, I need you to know that I won't change who I am for your world. I won't pretend to be something I'm not." Sebastian smiled and pulled her closer. "I don't want you to change. I want you exactly as you are. And I promise you, anyone who can't see how amazing you are doesn't deserve to be in our lives." Beginning 6 months later, Emma stood in the workshop of her newly opened technical training center. Watching a group of teenage girls work on their first engine rebuild, the facility was everything she had dreamed of: modern, well-equipped, and filled with young people eager to learn skills that would change their lives. Sebastian had insisted on funding the project, but he had done it quietly, without fanfare or conditions. The Emma Rodriguez Technical Institute was entirely hers to run as she saw fit, though she appreciated having a business partner who understood both engineering and entrepreneurship. "How are they doing?" Sebastian asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they watched the students work. "See that girl with the red hair?" Emma pointed to a 16-year-old who was carefully adjusting a carburetor. 2 months ago, she'd never held a wrench. Now she's rebuilding a transmission with the confidence of someone who's found her calling. Sebastian smiled against her hair. "She reminds me of someone I know." Emma leaned back against his chest, feeling completely content for the first time in her life. They had faced the challenges of merging their worlds, had weathered the skepticism and occasional hostility of Sebastian's social circle, and had emerged stronger for it. Richard Hawthorne had eventually become a supporter, impressed despite himself by Emma's business acumen as she developed the Technical Institute. More importantly, Sebastian had proven again and again that his love for her was stronger than any social pressure or business concern. The proposal that evening, Sebastian took Emma back to the Cuban restaurant where they'd had their first real date. Maria, the owner, greeted them like family, as she had every Friday night for the past 6 months. "The usual table?" Maria asked, with a knowing smile. "Actually," Sebastian said, "could we have the private dining room tonight? Have something?" Special planned. Emma raised an eyebrow, but followed him to the small back room where they had celebrated several milestones in their relationship. The space was softly lit by candles, and a single red rose lay beside her place setting. "Sebastian, what's all this?" Emma asked. Though her heart was already racing with suspicion and hope, Sebastian took her hands and dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box that held not a massive diamond, but a beautiful emerald surrounded by smaller stones that caught the candlelight perfectly. "Emma Rodriguez," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You changed my life the day you touched my Ferrari. You taught me the difference between owning beautiful things and understanding them, between having success and having meaning. You make me better every single day." Emma felt tears streaming down her cheeks as he continued. "I know I'm not perfect. I know my world comes with challenges and complications that you shouldn't have to deal with. But I promise you that every day for the rest of my life, I will choose you. I will stand beside you, support your dreams, and love you exactly as you are. Will you marry me?" Emma looked down at the man who had started as an arrogant stranger, screaming at her in a parking lot, and had become the love of her life. She thought about their journey, the obstacles they had overcome, the way he had supported her dreams while pursuing his own growth. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, Sebastian Knight, I will marry you." The ever after 1 year later, Emma Knight stood in her wedding dress in the garage where she had first begun to see Sebastian as more than just another entitled rich man. Her gown was elegant, but practical enough that she could still move freely because she had insisted on arriving at her wedding in the restored 1967 Shelby GT500 that Sebastian had given her as an engagement present. Carlos, who was walking her down the aisle, shook his head in amused disbelief. "Only you would insist on driving yourself to your own wedding." Emma grinned as she made final adjustments to the Shelby's engine. "This car has been part of our story from the beginning. Seems right that she should be part of the ending too." "This isn't an ending, Mia," Carlos said softly. "This is just the beginning of the best part." The wedding was held at the Technical Institute, surrounded by the students Emma had mentored and the community she had built. Sebastian's family of choice, the people who had supported his journey from struggling entrepreneur to successful businessman, mingled easily with Emma's world of mechanics, engineers, and dreamers. As Emma walked down the aisle, she saw Sebastian, waiting for her with tears in his eyes and a smile that outshone the Miami sunshine streaming through the windows. Richard Hawthorne stood beside him as best man, a position that symbolized how much their world had changed and grown. When the minister asked if anyone objected to their union, a voice called out from the back of the room, "I object to her driving that Shelby in a wedding dress. The clutch is too stiff for formal wear." The entire gathering burst into laughter, including Emma and Sebastian. It was exactly the kind of moment that defined their relationship, the perfect blend of practical concern and deep affection that had carried them through every challenge. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said with a broad smile. "You may kiss your bride, and someone please help her get that car safely to the reception." As Sebastian kissed his new wife, the Shelby's engine rumbled to life behind them, and Emma knew that this was indeed just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. Epilogue. 5 years later, Emma Knight Rodriguez stood in the boardroom of Knight Technologies, presenting quarterly reports to the company's board of directors. As Chief Innovation Officer, she had revolutionized the company's approach to product development, bringing the same systematic thinking she had once applied to engines to the world of software and technology. Sebastian watched with pride as his wife fielded questions from board members with the same confidence she had once shown. While diagnosing his Ferrari, the Emma Rodriguez Technical Institute had grown into a nationwide network of schools, and several of her former students now worked as engineers at major automotive and technology companies. Their personal collection of classic cars had grown, too, but now each vehicle was not just owned, but truly understood, maintained with love, and driven regularly rather than simply displayed. They'd learned together that the most beautiful machines were meant to be experienced, not just admired. "Any other questions?" Emma asked the board, and when no one spoke up, she smiled. "Then I think we can adjourn. Prototype testing results should be available next week." As the board members filed out, Sebastian remained behind, watching. his wife pack up her presentation materials with the same methodical precision she brought to everything she did. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Sebastian stood and moved to the window, looking out over the Miami skyline toward the industrial district where Rodriguez Auto Works still operated, now expanded, and thriving under Carlos's management. "I was thinking about that first day," he said, "when you touched my Ferrari and I completely lost my mind over it." Emma laughed, joining him at the window. "You were pretty awful. Lucky for you, I have a weakness for fixing broken things." "I wasn't broken," Sebastian protested with mock indignation. "I was just temporarily malfunctioning. It's like your car." That day, Emma agreed. Both of you needed someone who understood your systems well enough to get you running properly again. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, marveling as he always did at how perfectly she fit against him. "Think we're running properly now?" Emma smiled and kissed him softly. "Better than properly. We're running like a perfectly tuned machine, every component working in harmony." "Speaking of harmony," Sebastian said, his eyes twinkling with mischief, "I have a surprise for you." Emma raised an eyebrow. After 5 years of marriage, Sebastian's surprises ranged from romantic to completely unexpected, but they were always thoughtful. "What kind of surprise?" "The kind that requires us to drive to the warehouse district. And you might want to bring your tools." 20 minutes later, Emma found herself standing in front of a nondescript warehouse building, holding her favorite toolbox and wearing a confused expression. Sebastian led her to a side entrance and produced a key from his pocket.
Yes.
"Sebastian Knight, what have you done?" Emma asked as he unlocked the door. "Just trust me," he said. Flipping on the lights, Emma gasped. The warehouse had been converted into the most beautiful automotive workshop she had ever seen. Classic cars and various stages of restoration filled the space. From a 1969 Dodge Charger missing its engine to a pristine 1963 Corvette that gleamed under the bright LED lighting. Workbenches lined the walls, equipped with every tool an automotive enthusiasts could dream of. "This is incredible," Emma breathed, walking slowly through the space. "But Sebastian, we already have garages for our cars." "This isn't for our cars," Sebastian said, his voice warm with excitement. "This is for us, a place where we can work together on restoration projects. Where you can teach me everything my father never got the chance to show me. I bought all of these cars specifically because they need work, because they need someone who understands them to bring them back to life." Emma felt tears prick her eyes as she understood the magnitude of what he had created. This wasn't just a workshop. It was a bridge between their worlds. It's a place where his business success could fund her passion for automotive restoration, where they could build something beautiful together with their own hands. "There's more," Sebastian said, leading her to a corner of the warehouse where a familiar shape sat under a car cover. He'd pulled away the cloth to reveal a partially restored 1967 Ford Mustang. The same model her father had worked on in his garage so many years ago. "I found her at an auction," Sebastian explained. "She's got good bones, but she needs someone who loves Mustangs to bring her back to her glory. I thought maybe we could work on her together." Emma ran her hands over the Mustang's faded paint. Remembering countless hours spent beside her father as he worked on similar cars, the circle felt complete somehow. Her past and present merging in this perfect moment. "You know," she said, turning to face her husband, "when I first touched your Ferrari, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Sebastian laughed, pulling her close. "Neither did I, but I'm glad you didn't listen when I told you not to touch." "What didn't belong to you?" "Good thing I'm not very good at following orders," Emma replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Oh," Sebastian agreed. "You're much better at fixing things that are broken and making everything around you better." As they stood together in their new workshop, surrounded by automotive history waiting to be restored, Emma reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them here. She had started as a mechanic who appreciated beautiful machines, and Sebastian had been a billionaire who collected them without understanding them. Together, they had built something neither could have achieved alone, the Ferrari that had brought them. Together still held a place of honor in Sebastian's collection. But now it was driven regularly, maintained with love, and appreciated for the engineering marvel it truly was, just like their marriage. It had been transformed from something admired from a distance into something experienced, understood, and cherished every day. "So," Emma said, picking up a wrench and approaching the Mustang. Ready for your first reel? Lesson in automotive restoration. Sebastian grinned and rolled up his sleeves. I've been ready for 5 years. Teach me everything. And in that warehouse filled with classic cars and infinite possibilities, Emma Knight began teaching her billionaire husband that the most valuable things in life weren't the ones you could buy, but the ones you built together, one perfectly calibrated component at a time. The end.